Welcome back to the Beyond Cloud series of Discovery Discussions, presented by Intelligent HQ and hosted here in London at Group INSEE. Welcome back to the Beyond Cloud series of Discovery Discussions. Today we're meeting with Sales Director of Workbooks, Moyse, who also has a fairly strong technical background and is going to give us a slightly different perspective on cloud today. Ian, could we start off with a little bit about that background and how you got to where you are today with a little bit of the cloud flavor along the way, please?
Sure. So originally I got into IT as a lot to do by accident, but from a technical role. As a programmer, saw ZX81 at a neighbour's way back and started at IBM. So I worked on mainframe, centralised computing initially, and then watched the market develop, then moved into Novell networking, so went from one end of the scale to an emerging area, distributed computing, PCs, the IBM AT and XT as it came out. And now it feels like I've gone full circle back to cloud, which is how I describe is very much the back-end power of the mainframe, but accessed from the mobility of the desktop. So it's bringing the technologies we've had before, bringing it together to deliver a better user experience. So it's not new technology, as I say to people, it's really just a different use of stuff we've built over the years, and we've just naturally got to that progression.
So how do you move from a role as a technical guy in all of that space into a pure sales kind of a role? I understand how that works because it's kind of important to have the technical knowledge to sell it, right? But tell us a bit about your journey.
What I saw was working on mainframes, programming, analysis, and back then I simply saw sales guys out there who, to me, were getting all the niceties of the mobile phone, which at that point was this size, the car and all the benefits, but I didn't see that the experience I'd had is that it really understood what they were talking about. And it wasn't an easy transition in terms of finding someone to take a techie into a sales role, but I took a junior sales role, inside sales, was given that opportunity, and it was the early days of Novell networking. So it was a pad of paper, phone, pen, and off you go, supporting some field sales guys. So it was really tenacity of just work hard and use what I have found is the technical knowledge helped me differentiate myself in that I understood how the stuff worked, so I could answer customers' questions far quicker and gain credibility from them because I understood the underlying piece. I think the difficult part of that is transitioning from not talking techie speak to business people, is understanding it but talking their language and utilising the underlying knowledge to your advantage. So I don't look back now, I do miss the technical side and the programming, the creativity, but in terms of the opportunity to meet people, engage and get into the cloud environment wouldn't have come, I don't think, through the technical environment. It's much more fluid in the sales environment, and that's what I enjoyed. So it wasn't a planned move. I'd always wanted to be technical. That's what I was trained to do. And then once I got into that, I sort of accidentally saw there was something else where I could move into and benefit from.
It's actually a pretty similar story to mine. It was a slightly different branch at the end, taking that technical background and moving it into the business space to translate it. Because, like you say, we both come across salespeople who sometimes could benefit from having a technical person in the room, sometimes might be able to benefit more by realizing they don't have that type of knowledge. But I think one of the biggest values that you probably bring is when somebody's eyes start to glaze over because you're going too deep. And I think we always have to show that there's a flesh side and a bone side and all kinds of stuff in between, but you need to decide what your audience is. Have you found any tricks to be able to do this?
I think it's just adapting to the user. And often I found when talking to someone is they've started to go more technical. They do understand it, but when they've realised you can talk to that level, the engagement has gone deeper. I think where it's really helped me is in the cloud environment, because what tends to be happening is there's a lot of hype and pitch going on, and customers firstly want to understand the basics, and there's a lot of people talking, unfortunately, the technology, so it's gone the other way, I think, where a lot of people are pitching technology and terminology to customers, and they really want to just understand what's in it for me, why would I do this, the benefits. So I think we've maybe swung the other way in that cloud should be the generic non-techie speak of what it's going to do for you. You don't need to worry about how it's working under the covers, although that may be part of your diligence process. And I think a lot of what's going on is being pitched as either go cloud just because of what it's called, Or let me talk lots of terminology of SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, and customers glaze over for a different reason, because they're not actually as far along the path as the person speaking to them thinks they are.
I think that that's always the case. And I think this is one of the parts where our industry needs an awful lot more help from our own industry to be able to start to realize these lessons. We need teams that are working together rather than point individuals on particular areas of responsibility, which really mirrors what we're trying to get our customers to do as well, to tie things together. Now this moves us nicely to the second question about cloud, the hype, the news, the coverage that we see. Clearly it's the next big thing. If you want to add things, which I don't want to add, like SOMOCLO, I don't really like this acronym. I believe that we have a huge opportunity that we just need to work the way that we've been evolving over the past 25 years. In the context of workbooks, why is cloud better than the last big thing?
So I think let's talk generically. What's happening in the world is there's a change at the user end, whether it's users in small business, large business, consumers. There is a greater demand and expectation than we've ever seen before. You know, users are more IT literate, even the home user and school kids, than we've ever seen before.
Well, we see home use, driving, office use.
Yeah.
It used to be pushing it and encouraging it. Now it's driving it and mandating it.
Exactly, and we hear the terms BYOD, bring your own device, consumerization. You know, users now are expecting everything, anywhere, anytime, any device as default. And because they can do it at home, they can do it cheaply, there is a demand on business, even in the small business. Why can't I do this at work? Why can't you make this easier for me? And I want to access it anywhere. And the old world of doing this with a product on the network, then enabling VPN and secure wide area connections and getting people on devices and trying to figure all that out tends to be complex. And that's the way it always used to be. Whereas today, you can make a lot of this stuff incredibly simple. Just moving a large file around, you can figure it out with no training how to use one of the shared file storage and movement packages out there in the cloud, whereas previously it would be, how do I get this there? Email won't work, FTP, you get a techie to do it. We've just made IT consumable, which is good.
It is, but the part about getting a techie to do it sometimes means it gets done a little bit more completely, a little bit more awareness of some of the needs are. Yes, you can share that file using Dropbox or some other mechanism, but is that secure? Does that file need to be more secure? So bring your own device, bring your own server, bring your own applications. I get it, but we are still at risk of wasting time and effort on IT as opposed to IT reducing wasted time and effort.
Agreed, and my position around cloud is that cloud doesn't solve every problem for every... A lot of people talk about cloud, that everything should go cloud for every need. I disagree. I'm a cloud advocate, but I disagree with that. I think really where we are today is cloud gives you an option you didn't have before, and it's a viable option, but it introduces different challenges. So whilst it may solve all the connectivity anywhere, any device, pretty much by just switching on, absolutely introduces other problems such as password management. Is data now on my mobile device, and what about the security of that and the implication of that, whereas previously it was all centralized? So cloud doesn't just solve everything out of the box and it's easy. It solves some problems and introduces others. And I think one of the challenges of cloud, a lot of technical people tend to be against it because they're seeing it as they won't need me anymore. And I totally disagree. They need you, but now your role will be different. You'll be solving different problems. It won't be buy a bit of software, install it, install the VPN, the connectivity and set up this. That may be done straight away for you. But now you move on to more interesting stuff such as security, such as policy. How do you integrate perhaps that cloud application with your local application? How do you transfer data between the two? And the diligence you make around which cloud provider you use. Data sovereignty, a particular hot subject right now with all the PRISM news. Data liberation, how do you get stuff back? So it introduces new questions, and it means the people in the business and the IT people need to move on and develop new skills that are more valuable to the world we're now in.
Fair enough. I still have some problems with a couple of these bits. Like the technical part of the organization, there is a risk at losing your people if you don't move towards the cloud because they're going to find other opportunities and they don't want their skills to stagnate. We both know that techies and salespeople are the ones typically hit hardest by change, but that's part of the career path, right? You need to be constantly current and up to date. If your company is, let's use Oracle as an example, if you're running a standard Oracle database system and you can't do Oracle Cloud for security reasons or compliance reasons or some type of concerns that you have, your team who are being prevented from using Oracle Cloud may start looking for new opportunities for work someplace else. So we have more than one type of a driver, slightly different than it was before, because the techies were always able to keep up to date as the business changed. Now, if the business doesn't change, they're either going to lose the techies, or the techies are going to end up like the COBOL programmers from the 80s and 90s. So that's a little bit of a difficult one. And for companies to adapt and adopt cloud, if they're going into a new space, they probably have a pretty good chance that's the right answer. But I think they need to look a lot more carefully when they're transitioning from the old to the new. The same as the people do with the skills, both business and technical.
I think what we've got is, I mean, there was a lot of talk about mainframes and old applications will all be gone. They're still out there, right? We haven't just got rid of everything old, and I think that's what we'll see with cloud. There is this hype around everything will go cloud. What I position to people, as I've already said, is it's an option that you've now got you didn't have before, and it's a mix and match option of on network. So being a cloud advocate, you'd expect me to say everything should go cloud. I don't. I still use PowerPoint on my PC, whereas there's cloud presentation tools, but it works for me. So why am I don't see any benefit and upside of that changing, but I use Boxnet and Dropbox for moving files around, because that works for me rather than trying to get big files through email, which typically now are getting bounced increasingly as people put limits in. So I'm mixing and matching where the right application solves the right problem for me. And that's really what people should be looking at, whether in large firms, medium or small, is when you're moving into a new project, when you're refreshing technology, is just consider the pros and cons of cloud. And there will always be pros and cons of any solution, no matter who it's from, which vendor, or what you're looking to achieve. And it's just weigh them up. And I think what we've seen is two distinct changes from cloud. One is at the customer end, there's now a leveling in terms of the options you now have. Before, there was a lot of technology which inherently, because the way it was designed and the cost to get going, was big company. There were products which you wouldn't find a small company using, because by the time you've licensed the software, the underlying database, the hardware you need to run it and set it all up, it's cost prohibitive for a 20-user business before you even start.
Or a startup.
So there was products they wouldn't use in that way, whereas now, if there's a cloud opportunity, whether you're 5 users or 5,000 users, you're going to pay and license for your relative to your size of business. So to a degree, not across every product, but freedom of choice now is you can use the same product as a small company as big and vice versa. And the dichotomy is the same for the vendors. Previously, smaller vendors found it harder to compete with the big vendors. Workbooks, we deliver cloud CRM, and we compete with the big CRM vendors out there, which previously as a product would have been difficult, because how would we get our message out? How would customers get a trial? How would we scale and reach customers in different territories? It would be a hard slog and a longer slog. Whereas today, we've got customers around the world who've selected us over the bigger vendors. It enables vendors to be nimbler, develop quicker, and be more innovative, but with lower cost. So customers therefore get more freedom of choice as well from new innovative technologies. And a lot of that is coming out of the UK, which is great. Whereas previously a lot of it was Silicon Valley led, and you had to be big before you could even start.
I think one of the things that doesn't change throughout all of this is you really need to get a good grip on what your requirements are before you start trying to get an answer. And I mean, we've had this problem for 25 or 30 years, ever since computers have been around. And the other angle is cloud isn't necessarily the answer just because you've asked a question. Now, for a startup to enable all of the things that you've talked about, absolutely. Yep. For larger businesses, it depends on what you need now and what your plans are going to be later. And if you don't do it right, you're going to make the same mistakes that we've made.
But that's the same whether you're cloud or not.
Yes.
What I've said to people is you've still got to go through the diligence. It's just a batch of the questions you're going to go through around the infrastructure piece. The functionality is still going to be the same type of questions. Does it do this and process this? That's the requirement at the business level for a solution we need. But on the underlying technology, there will be new questions that you wouldn't have asked previously. Data sovereignty, where's my data? Who has access to it? Where's, things that weren't relevant. If it was a product-based, the questions just didn't exist because they answered themselves. But that's the real difference, and customers, I think, need to educate. What we've seen is there's a real mix of knowledge out there of what questions to ask, but also understanding the answers. Because what we have had is customers asking, here's a bunch of questions around cloud, we're looking at a cloud solution, and what I've often asked them is you look at the questions, and that looks like a list you've pulled from somewhere. And the questions are a bit obtuse to what you're asking for the solution. Can I just ask, are they your questions? And do you understand the answers when you get them? And that's one of the problems, I think, is a lot of people, it's not just knowing what questions to ask, it's do you understand the answers you're going to get from the cloud vendor to interpret and compare and contrast like for like. If not, you're pretty much now in another grey area.
Part of the problem that we have is that there's too much information out there for people to use to try to get answers for themselves, but if they start using it without the right tools, then they end up with the wrong answers. So the internet has enabled an awful lot more, but it's also been a bit of a roadblock in some ways to actually allowing people to do things the right way.
And I think in addition to that, what we've got is there's a lot of talk around industry standards and consistency around cloud. I think we're going to struggle to get standards because it's the internet and it's global, and as we see all the different dichotomies today about laws and internet laws trying to be put in place and cross borders, and the same is going to go with standards. Who's going to bring the standard out? Is it going to be vendor led, in which case other vendors won't go with it, or is it going to be regional led, and again we're going to have the same issue? I think what we do need, and what I sat on the governance board of the Cloud Industry Forum, what we're trying to drive there is an openness from the vendors themselves. Is do yourselves a good service by helping the customer and being open in terms of sharing with them the information in a consistent format, but don't make them dig for it. Don't make them dig for where your data centers are, how you do this stuff. Why not be open and give customers more comfort and understanding and talk English language rather than terminology? Because I think that will help the adoption of cloud, and it will also help customers make the right decision for a good experience.
So Ian, you've already moved us into the third question around
Sure,
standards and regulation, and that's an interesting angle that you have, because I personally believe that these are clearly two different areas. Regulations from a government perspective that should be about what's in the cloud, not the cloud itself. Mm-hmm. From the standards perspective, we do have a lot of work in that area. I've spent a career watching standards battles that have been happening, and I don't know necessarily the great amount of value that we're looking for. Questions like, where's my data? I go a little bit more deep than that. It's where's my data and how do I get it back?
Absolutely. Yeah. Data liberation is critical, and people never ask. We find on the way in, it's usually at the end of an engagement, unfortunately, that they ask that question, and then they may get the surprises.
See, the difference is they've been growing up in a world where they've been doing outsourcing, where you've got finite contracts of, say, a 5 or a 7 year period, and at the end of that, there is already a defined mechanism to take it all away and put it someplace else, like in a big government tender. We're finding people that are doing that with their data now, as you just said, asking the question after the fact, but we're not looking at 5-year contracts, and we don't have clear exits like we have had. So we have these open-ended things where you have no idea how to get your stuff back. If you don't ask that question up front, if you don't ask where it is, you're not going to be compliant, you're not going to be paying attention to your own rules and laws, and you're going to be subject to getting hit with some pretty significant compliance fees, which is funny enough because that makes security a add-on to your systems being built in as a money saver as opposed to an extra cost. So are you seeing this type of thing?
Yeah, and this is really where I think there needs to be more education around cloud than removed from the hype. And the challenge is vendors aren't interested in educating customers because that's got a cost, and how do you monetize that at the end? And I always encourage when I speak to groups of end user customers is, there are resources you can go, but go and get educated on the fundamentals of this stuff, because it isn't going away. And whether it's in your role today or your business decision today or later, it's going to come up. And knowing the right questions to ask and understanding those answers and doing the diligence is going to enable you to use cloud in the right way and choose it at the right time to be successful. And things like data liberation, data sovereignty, it's not rocket science. It's just stuff people haven't necessarily asked before and known the questions to ask. How do you get your data back? Or what format is it going to be in? And can I get it back myself, or do I need to request it? And is there any cost? They're not complex questions.
Are my systems going to be running 100% throughout the entire process? Do I have downtime when
and do I have to get it out before the contract ends? So I mean, we see this as a competitive advantage at Workbooks, because what we've done is made it very open, talked about data liberation, openly publicised that you can get your data back 90 days after you're out of contract. And there's no exit clause, you just don't renew. And up to 90 days following that, you can still export your data in open format of CSV or OpenSQL data. You can get the data back in a totally open format that you can be portable with. And there's no gotcha or sudden cut-off point where you're stuck. Customers like that, and we encourage that as a competitive point when we talk to them. And vendors need to wake up to this of, if you're open and do it in a good way, it's actually a good selling point for the customer because they're going to ask other vendors comparing, well, how do you do this? Because we like that.
If they do, yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the problem, the buyer beware aspect that we have, which is where I believe that there's a place for us to do some type of standardization, not a big international standard where everybody has to buy into it, because we can't monitor it, we can't enforce it, we can't do much about it. But if the standards are around education, so people at least know which questions to ask, then they're being defended, and the companies that aren't doing what Workbooks are doing, aren't making it clear and transparent, will end up losing business and will either change or disappear. It's a VHS beta thing all over again, more than ever before, because we've got both camps have great technology, both sides of the table have different approaches that can work for you, and it's a matter of what works in the long term. We've been doing this outsourcing thing for a long time, and it has always worked, but it's the time frames that are changing.
But I think the difference between outsourcing generically and terms of cloud addresses a wider customer base, and an awful lot of the customers coming into this who get great advantage, and I think you said startups and smaller companies can benefit with flexibility and power they couldn't have before. It was unaffordable, and their users are demanding it through the mobility we mentioned. The challenge is those guys aren't used to asking these questions, and they haven't got a team of technical people, and they really need the education. So they're the ones that can benefit the most, but they're the ones who potentially can choose the wrong vendor the easiest.
But they're also the ones who today have the most equipment, tools, and arsenals to look into for information to do the stuff right. So I wrote a couple of weeks ago that I've got a lot less sympathy for people making massive errors in systems today than I would have had 10 years ago, because the amount of knowledge and expertise that's available, how much more they know about what they don't know
well, the information's out there, and I think you're right, the internet, I mean, the wealth of material and education customers have at their fingertips now that they didn't have 10 years ago, it is on an extreme difference. But I think the challenge is, which one's the good bits of info? Because, you search on cloud, where you're going to start, you're going to find firstly the things you get are going to be the big vendor sponsored stuff, because they can make sure that they're at the top of the searches. So you're going to be vendor and technology bias led rather than independently. And then which do you read? What I've seen from the average customer is the challenge with cloud is they've sort of blinkered because there's so much hype about it. Every magazine you pick up, whether it's technology, business, or a plain magazine, cloud. So a lot of them have just switched off to the term. And when I present on cloud generically and just do an education session often, I get people say, "Do you know, that's what I wanted to know. I don't want to know about the product. I just want to know the basics." But no one, I think what's happening is the industry is assuming everyone gets this. And if you look at the advertising and marketing around cloud, it's farther on than the actual customer is.
Oh, than the actual products that they're advertising as well.
So the hype's taken it far in excess of where it is. And we need to step back, and there needs to be some basic education with customers. This stuff isn't scary. You can get good benefit, but there's some fundamental things you need to know generically that you don't know today. There's the Cloud Industry Forum in the UK, there's Eurocloud, there's good resources, there's CompTIA Cloud Essentials for education. It's out there, good, clear, independent, vendor agnostic information. That's where you need to start, not the vendor pitch.
Exactly, and I agree with you. The signal to noise ratio is very high. Even when it's all signal, there's just so much to look from. I think that if you don't know what you're asking for, you need to get somebody to help you to ask for it, because that's the investment that you make to ensure the other investments that you make are being done right. It's a lot more complex world, and there's an awful lot more opportunity to make some serious mistakes. Now, with cloud moving us forward, our fourth question follows my premise. The cloud's the delivery vehicle that takes us places. I'm not worried about social, cloud, big for qualifiers for things like data and mobile computing, because to me what we're talking about is ubiquitous computing. You can get what you want anywhere you want. It would be really good if somebody working for me had a local copy in case the network wasn't down, so you can actually get your job done. So people need to remember the limitations. But what do you think we're going to be looking at differently in terms of cloud as a delivery vehicle going forward, and where else is it going to take us beyond the big hits of today, which are data, social, and mobile computing?
I think what we're going to see is, firstly, we need to move away from the term cloud. It's been pitched as, there's a lot of cloud washing gone on, where products have got cloud labels on them because it's great to market it, and you can debate whether those products are really cloud, multi-tenancy, and giving the customer the benefit in reality. I think what we're going to see is the reality that's going on now expanding is customers are choosing this stuff in reality because of what it does for them. And a lot of people are using cloud today and don't realise it. And I often walk them through this in that initial discussion, and I didn't know that was cloud. You know, if you've been on a webinar meeting, a GoToMeeting, etc., well, how's that work? Do you really know? Do you know? But look at what the technology enables you to do. Have you used Shazam on a phone? Great British innovative company. You get your music track, you can hear it. It's indicated what it is. How's that worked? A lot of people think, well, it's happened on the phone in the app. No, it's connecting back to something. It's cloud, but they don't care. They haven't chosen it because of what it's called in cloud. They've just chosen it because look what it does. And I think that's where we're going to see the market going towards. We're going to get away from this. And we get to say customers asking, well, I'm looking for a solution, but non-cloud. It's move away from whether it's cloud or not cloud. What is the end result you're trying to get?
Yeah, what is
and
the
then
right
work
answer?
Backwards from that. And if it ends up being a cloud solution, fine. If it doesn't, fine. And you ask different questions on that path. But move away from all the terminology, all the hype, and just look at the benefits that you're looking for. Because we're too technology-led. This stuff's being sold based on technology. It's being sold based on how whizzy it is. And it needs to move back to solution selling around business applications and the end result, whether it be top line or bottom line benefit for the business. I think that's the real change we're going to see. I think the other change we're going to see is the business being increasingly pressured from the users. We're seeing it today as more and more youth comes into this, and I do some school speaking, and they're all on mobile phones, they're all used to using this stuff, and they take it for granted. They're going to come into business and look at us with the server sat there and ask, what the hell is that thing? Why are we doing it that way? This is ridiculous. And see that they're doing stuff at home, quicker, faster, cheaper, easier, more flexibly than the business is delivering them. And these are the future people who are going to come in and make decisions in business or influence decisions. So I think we're going to see people who are more laggards in terms of I'm resisting this stuff, moving out into retirement, moving out of business, and the receptiveness is going to change.
Can't disagree, and I couldn't probably put it an awful lot differently myself, but I worry a little bit about talking about your phone being cloud and using these examples for people, because I think it tends to just confuse things an awful lot for them. I believe that the right answer is what you need it to do, and the right way to deliver it is the best, most cost-effective way to do that, that wraps up with what you have done in the past and what you're planning to do for the future.
But think about the mobile devices, and I get where you're coming from, but I use that as an example because it gets people to realise it's not about the device. And if you look at the sales, look at the reports on PCs and the shift in the market, you know, there are challenges in that market for those vendors because the number of people that are using tablets now as their core device or their only device. I think we're going to see a bit of a shift back towards a mixed environment.
Yeah, well,
because they have their limitations of interface and.
But you have to remember, these numbers are talking an awful lot more consumer items than business items, right? The
understand.
tablet's not replacing a desktop or a laptop
But more and
in the
more,
office.
but more and more, I'm talking to businesses where they're talking about users, like you've had, you know, the company car schemes and contributions of, we're going to give you, and I've spoken to a number of businesses where they're already doing this, and they're giving a compensation to the employee if they use their own device. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. You know, who would have thought way back that companies would have paid you to buy your own car as a compensation, rather than just giving you a company car that they keep as an asset. That shift's happened. Very few people now have the company vehicle. I think we're going to see not such a big shift, but we're already seeing the first signs of, well, if you've got your device and you're willing to buy it, take all the liability, as long as we can figure a way of securing it and managing centrally when you're on the device and also clearing it afterwards, that gives us flexibility in the business.
It's a brilliant example of a significant mind shift that has happened, because bring your own device used to be considered a more expensive thing. Now, like working at home, companies were doing a little bit of this behind the scenes because they knew they were getting more productivity and value out of their people. When you've got your own device and it's more simple, but if you add that into the actual IT department, then over time, then you're going to see some significant changes.
And it is still needing IT. I think there again, back to what we were talking about, IT now is a different role. How do you secure those devices? How do you remote wipe them? So there's new innovative products coming out around cloud password identification and single sign-on, and around remote wipe. So there's new technologies evolving and products, and there's also now a new need for education and changing in IT, which is exciting. You need to learn something new and not just do the old. So there's still a need for that expertise and that value in the business.
Thanks very much for joining us today, Ian. I really quite enjoyed your different perspectives and views, and I think it adds nicely to the mix that we have here in the series.
Cool. You're welcome. Thank you.